to this 16th annual Chesapeake Bay Watershed Forum. Before we get started, I wanted to give a huge thank you to all of our sponsors that help make this forum possible. Before we get started, I wanted to give you guys just a few housekeeping notes. As you just heard, the session is being recorded. So if there were people that you were aware of that weren't able to attend the live session this morning, it will be available for participants after the fact. The host has muted all of you to keep the noise level in the background down this morning. So what that means is that the questions that you have, please feel free to chat them to us, and we will get to as many as we possibly can at the end. You can either do that through the Zoom chat function, or you can do it through the Whova host that you are watching this on. If you could do us a favor, if you could update your name with your organization and pronouns so that we know who's here, who we know who our general audience is, and who we can see who is attending with us, that would be really wonderful. To do that, you just hover over your own picture, the three little dots in the upper right-hand corner of your picture, and select rename, and it'll allow you to do that. If you are having any sort of technical issues or questions that come up, please, you feel free to message me in the chat inbox, and I will do the best I can to assist you. There are going to be a few Slido polls during the presentation this morning. I am certain that many of you are familiar with the Slido platform, but if you're not, it's very, very easy to use. You can either open a new web browser on your computer and go to slido.com, or you can simply take your phone and take a picture of this barcode and it'll pop you right into the Slido. If you go to slido.com, the number of the polls that we will be using this morning is 068266. If anyone is having problems with Slido, again, just chat me and I'll do my best behind the scenes to help you figure it out. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to our two wonderful presenters this morning. Nissa is the Virginia State Director for the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and Grace LeRose is a policy advisor with the Department of Public Utilities for the City of Richmond. And I am going to now mute myself and hand it over to Nissa and Grace to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. Our first poll is, what is your affiliation? Please fill it in so we can get a feel for where you all come from and what your interests might lie in. We got a lot of NGOs, a little bit of government. I'm looking for about 30 plus respondents. Some of you still might need a little persuading. I think I see the trend here, mostly NGO with the local and state government. So that's interesting for us. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to jump in and I'll turn it over to, I'll talk a little bit about what RVAH2O is. I come from local government. I'm the City of Richmond DPU employee, and we began the process of what is known as integrated planning, for those of you who aren't aware of it, which is an EPA program. And what it does is looks at managing water resources holistically. So in other words, looking at the way stormwater and wastewater and combined sewer and stormwater and drinking water all depend on each other. So it's not looking at each of those in a silo, it's bringing them all together. What Richmond did was take EPA's framework and tweak it a little bit, we thought stakeholder involvement was very important. So we did that from the beginning of our program rather than at the middle or the end of the program, as EPA envisioned. And what that ended up with for us was a really robust stakeholder engagement process that has lasted to this day, actually. At the end of our process, we ended up with the first integrated permit in the Commonwealth of Virginia and what we refer to today as the Clean Water Plan for Richmond, which prioritized pollutants in each of our 20 watersheds. Next slide, please. As far as green infrastructure projects, if you have worked on any, we're interested in how many partners you collaborated with on those. So say, for instance, you're an NGO and you work with a local government, that would be 2 partners. If you are state government and you had NGOs and schools and the garden club, that's 3 projects. 3 partners. So just to kind of get a feel for how your projects are working. So that's good, 3 to 5 partners for a lot of you. That's really good. All right, next slide, please. The way that we looked at doing this particular project, the Green Infrastructure Master Plan, which was an outgrowth of the Clean Water Plan, where the stakeholders said one of the things they wanted to see the city do was, in addition to working on reducing pollution in the watersheds, various ways, upgrading the wastewater treatment plant, working in the MS4, reducing combined sewer overflows, was they wanted to see internal collaboration and partner projects. So the Alliance came to us after we completed the Clean Water Plan and said, we're working with NIFWIF and we want to work with the city to help bring green infrastructure. And we said, that's great. Let's align it with the Clean Water Plan, which identified 3 priority watersheds, and it identified the primary pollutant in those watersheds as bacteria because they were combined sewer overflows. So what we did was bring the different departments together in the city, which I know this will come as a shock to all of you, is that we sometimes don't work great together. We all tend to have our silos. Parks will do one thing and DPW would do another, and utilities is off in another direction, and sustainability. So you get the picture that we're all trying to do good work, but sometimes we don't really collaborate to benefit these kinds of projects. So what our program, this Green Infrastructure Master Plan, said was, let's try to improve that process by bringing people together and talking about where we want to see green infrastructure in the city. Also during COVID, so it was all done virtual. So next slide, please. Again, this is an outgrowth from our Clean Water Plan. What you see highlighted here are the 3 watersheds where we identified we needed to do the most work first. And that's because these are the most heavily polluted watersheds in the city. And that is because they are both combined and they are the oldest parts of the city. They have the most impervious area, they're the most built out, and they are the oldest. So it's 3 different watersheds, what we refer to as Cannon's Branch and Shockoe Creek, which you can see drains most of the north side of Richmond. Gillies Creek, which is on the eastern portion of the city, and what is used to be an old industrial city, Manchester, annexed by the city in the early 1900s, and is now seen just a boom in growth. Also very built out, previously industrial. So we looked for ways to make these watersheds greener. Next slide, please. And that leads us to the Green Infrastructure Master Plan.
Great, thanks, Grace.
Thank you, Nissa.
So what I'm going to talk to you about in the next series of slides is kind of what brought us to where we are today and the tools that we've developed along the way. So as Grace was saying, our goal was to bring together partners to develop a green infrastructure master plan for those 3 priority watersheds. And to do that, the Alliance also brought in Arcadis, a consulting firm that worked with us on developing a ranking and prioritization tool that would allow us to better understand where the best sites are for green infrastructure. Now my slides won't advance. There we go. Oh, sorry. And so I'm using this slide here just to kind of take a step back and explain kind of the why. So Grace kind of touched on that. You know, lots of nonprofits have been partnering with the City of Richmond Department of Public Utilities over the years, working to implement wonderful green infrastructure projects that not only address nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment runoff pollution, but also increase urban tree canopy and green spaces. And while we all have that common goal of trying to increase access to green space, increase tree canopy, and reduce stormwater pollution, oftentimes the lack of coordination that Grace referred to between city departments can impede the success or timely implementation of some of those projects. And so when we were talking about how to shape this project, we really wanted to focus on that why. And so we spent significant amount of time talking to each of the internal city departments, talking to our nonprofit colleagues, friends, and partners to understand what they wanted to see and what we could do to make improvements to that process and how to do it. So that yellow circle there is kind of the how. And I think our prioritization tool kind of touches on that. And then that helps us, and will continue to help us identify what it is that we will do to increase our impact in terms of environmental restoration and improvement. So the 2 main outcomes we're talking about today are that green infrastructure ranking and prioritization tool that then informed the development of our green infrastructure master plan. So originally we thought we might try to do a deep dive into the ranking and prioritization tool, but given the amount of time that we have available to us, we realized it wouldn't quite work. So I'm going to give you an overview of what's included in the tool and what it analyzes to produce outputs, but also want to let you all know that the City of Richmond will be conducting a deep dive and live interactive kind of workshop later in this year. So if you all are interested in that, we would be happy to include you in that. So please feel free to either send Grace or I an email or drop your name in the chat, and your contact information, and we'll follow up with you. So one of the first things that we did, and actually we worked with Arcadis on this, they conducted an assessment of the available public lands within the City of Richmond that we could assess to determine whether or not green infrastructure would be an appropriate practice. They found that there are actually 531 parcels in the city, and those are all, comprised of different land uses. So some are commercial, some are government, industrial, educational, some are office properties, and 181 of those are already public open space, such as parks and community centers, and 215 of those are vacant. So unused properties that were maybe previously used as commercial or industrial properties. And then there are, of course, many right-of-ways, but we actually, in looking at the available parcels, decided, because right-of-ways are often have many different utilities underneath of them, especially in an older city like Richmond, we stayed away from including those in our available public lands for green infrastructure. So once Arcadis kind of did that analysis and understood the number of available parcels, we worked with them to develop criteria that would kind of screen out the unsuitable sites. And so those are kind of 3 different categories there. One, areas that have surface and subsurface utilities, areas where the soils aren't suitable for green infrastructure or infiltration rates would be too low to actually install them, or there would be a high water table, or environmental hazards where you don't really want to be pulling up that soil. And then also public activity disruption. So bus stops or areas where there are other structures in place, rather than pulling those up, we will stay away from those. So we kind of made those determinations and then moved forward to examining how we would prioritize those sites. And so what we did was kind of also looked at the number of projects that have gone in the past and the priorities in the Clean Water Plan, as well as a number of other priorities from nonprofits, from other city departments. So, and we use those items to develop a prioritization or a scoring system for each of those sites that are available in the tool. And so here you see the list of 8 of them. I'll take a minute to kind of mention that the social and sustainability benefits refers to the city's health equity index. So we're not only looking at impervious cover, water quality benefits, tree canopy, those types of things, and flooding issues, but we're also looking at where there are social inequities, and that touches on our DEIJ component and goals there. So we want to make sure that we're locating green infrastructure practices in areas that will also benefit the community. Many of the highly impervious areas that we see in the city of Richmond and other urban areas are prone to, the folks who live there are prone to higher rates of heart disease, also shorter lifespans. I think a VCU and Science Museum of Virginia study noted that a lot of folks living in those areas have a life expectancy, sometimes 15 to 20 years shorter than other communities who have more access to green space and tree canopy and those sorts of things. So we really wanted to make sure that we were including that element in our work. And then of course you also see water quality and flow capture, areas where we can really capture lots of runoff and improve water quality in area streams. So those are the site prioritization categories that we have. And what's interesting about the tool is that we can then look at a given area and determine which of these we would like to use to most heavily influence the location of green infrastructure. And in doing that, we've developed a few, or what came out of the tool was a couple of potential projects that are kind of high priority that helped us elevate and identify parcels that would be most appropriate for green infrastructure. And so here you see Annie Giles Community Resource Center. That's on the east end in the Gillies Creek watershed area. Charlie Sidner Playground. And then also Hull Street. Hull Street is in the Manchester side of the city, south side of the river. And then also increasing pervious parking in Manchester and South Side. All of those areas, as we mentioned before, are highly impervious and also just don't have, the community members don't have a lot of access to green infrastructure. So in identifying those potential projects, we've used that to draft our master plan. We've been working with Arcadis and the other city departments and partners and RVAH2O to pull together the different elements that would then design this plan that can be used by the city and partners to help prioritize and select green infrastructure projects for future implementation. So what our next steps are is to meet with, again, with the RVAH2O stakeholder collaborative on November 9th, and we will share our draft plan. We will solicit input from everyone, kind of just validating, you know, here's all of the things we heard from you. Here's the outputs from all of the interaction we've had over the last 2 years. Is there anything missing? And then what priority projects of those that rose to the top from our assessments would you like to see implemented? And based on that input, we'll make final edits to the plan and we'll select our green infrastructure project to install over the next year to year and a half or so. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, we will also continue to conduct trainings on how to use that prioritization tool. It is housed on the city's Power BI software program, and all of the city departments have access to that. So for our nonprofit partners and colleagues, if project ideas come up, what we will be doing is encouraging them to reach out to the city and sit down and plug those ideas into the prioritization tool to see how things rank. And given the amount of data and assessment that's been done in developing the tool, it will allow us to kind of then determine, well, this idea is nice, but we've got too many utilities over here. It's not in an ideal location. What's nearby that we can achieve the same kind of results and goals, and then also implement a project with much more ease. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Grace, for the next question.
Thank you, Nissa. That was great. I just wanted to mention a couple things that was really, I think, useful in the Green Infrastructure Master Plan that were beneficial to our departments. One was the ability to choose what was most important to your department. So say, for instance, in parks, they don't really care about volume reduction, but they want to increase green spaces and tree canopy. So they could prioritize that, whereas maybe DPW wants less volume, stormwater volume on the street, so they would prioritize that. And that the tool was already tied to our GIS, so it made it very, very usable, very user-friendly for the folks who design projects in each of those departments. All right, so our next question on Slido is, what was the outcome or benefits of collaborating on your projects? I see somebody already put additional funding. That's always a great benefit. We felt like in the RVAH2O collaborative that we could bring resources to a project. So we wanted to collaborate where there were already ongoing projects like a Belmead Green Street or the East End Collaborative or bike paths or wherever there already was activity, that it was good for us to come in and bring what we could to the table. So that was a benefit for collaboration on us. Yeah, these are great. Community involvement, holistic, additional funding. Yeah, these are all really great answers. Thank you for that. All right. Next slide, please. So one of the things, always lessons learned, right? I'm glad somebody mentioned community buy-in on the slide before, because that's important as well. Sometimes projects are not well received by the neighborhoods for whatever reason. Perceived as bump outs could be perceived as removing parking spaces where parking spaces are at a premium. So there's a lot of communication that has to go on with the local folks and say, what is it that you need here? How can we help make your neighborhood greener? I think in the end, everybody wants to live in a safe and healthy environment in a neighborhood. It's just, what is that definition to the local folks? So have patience, take small steps. Sometimes it takes education. I know when we first began work in stormwater, ponds were the big thing. Everybody wanted a stormwater pond. Now, if you talk to people and say, we want to put a pond in, people say, well, what about mosquitoes, or who's going to maintain it? So there's just a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. So you have to continually be talking to your folks, to your neighbors, your community. Collaboration. Next slide, please. Oh, let me go back to that one. I'll just tell you what that project is. This is one of the ones we might be working on hopefully soon. This is next to a school. It's adjacent to a school. And the Parks Department is putting in some basketball courts here. And then some parking. Right now it's a green space. And this is an example of us collaborating with another city department. So they already have this project on the books, and we came in and said, hey, let's make it greener. Can we make the basketball court porous, or can we make the parking greener? What can we do as DPU? We'll add money to it to make your already existing project that you have community support for greener. So that's what this is. This is next to one of our schools in our underserved neighborhood. Okay, now next slide. Did we miss a couple?
No, I don't think so.
I thought I saw some other ones in between. Yeah, this one. There you go. Thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Molly now.
Thank you so much, Nissa and Grace. So I think that the first question I would like to pose is actually for the audience, if that's okay with the two of you. Audience members, please feel free to either unmute yourselves and answer the question directly, or put your answer into the chat and we can read it out loud for the rest of the audience. But based on that presentation, I'd really like to know, have any of you found successful strategies to get departments with competing interests to collaborate? What have your experiences been regarding that tough nut?
Wow, you went right to it, didn't you, Molly?
I did.
I think it's always a conversation. One of our biggest nuts to crack is with DPW, because they want to come in and pave. The citizens want no potholes, they want sidewalks, they want parking lots, parking spaces, and they just want to get it done, essentially. So we come in and say, no, let's make it greener. And the response is always, it's too expensive. It's too much maintenance and it's too expensive. So I think we have to continually be talking to those folks and saying it might be more expensive and it might take more maintenance, but at the end of the day, it's a better project. It's greener, it's healthier. That's what we want to do. So there's no magic. There's no magic word that says, oh, now DPW is going to want to put in green everywhere. It really is that constant conversation about how to make a healthier, better city for our residents.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. And I think to the lessons learned, the collaboration piece that we say is key, and the conversation that has to happen. It doesn't happen just once. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, well, we'll have this collaborative meeting and we'll do this thing and we'll set up a process and that'll be it. That means everybody will work together again, right? And the answer is no. It means you have to have continued conversations and continued tools available to use to help you reinforce the conversations and the agreements that you've made so that you can continue to collaborate. So it's one of the beautiful things about RVAH2O is that it is an ongoing kind of structure for all of the partners to come together and meet and continue that conversation, continue to share ideas, projects, problems even, and work collaboratively to find solutions and ways to keep doing what we're doing and keep advancing in our goals.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Does anyone from the audience have anything to add? Oh, all right. We have, let's see. Facilitation is also helpful. I think using outside facilitators can aid in the collaboration efforts where there are departments that have a hard time seeing eye to eye. Grace and Nissa, is that also your experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Grace mentioned one of the projects that we've been involved in, and that's as well over the years, and that's the East End Green Infrastructure Collaborative. We brought in Ebony Walden from from the city of Richmond's East End. She's a known facilitator and very familiar with the issues that, many communities are working through. And we brought her in to kind of work with all of the partners who are doing any kind of work in the East End of Richmond, departments, nonprofits, civic association members, that sort of thing, to hear, what everybody needs and how can we better collaborate. And her facilitation was key to that process as well, because she was able to kind of listen intentionally to everyone and then pull together, recommendations from outside, and not really, it was just more unbiased. It's a much more unbiased process. And as a result of that, we've also been able to work with partners over there to identify other green infrastructure projects that we've received funding from recently, such as the Fulton Hill Greening Greater Fulton project that we're excited to kick off this year. So outside facilitation is key.
And I'll say we used Being Early at UVA for the whole RVAH2O process from beginning to end. Was facilitated by those folks who did a phenomenal job. I'll put a plug in for them here.
Before we move on to the next question, does any other audience member have anything to add to that one? All right, then I'm going to move on to the next question. Nissa and Grace, could you speak a bit more about your site prioritization scoring process? In particular, did you weigh any priorities higher than others?
Again, this is the beauty of the tool, is that it's flexible. So each department can choose which of those priorities to give more weight to. So like I said before, if DPW wants to put volume reduction at the highest scoring, they can do that. And the projects will winnow themselves out to those that show the most volume reduction. Whereas as an example, DPW or DPU is interested in water quality improvements, how much sediment is removed, how much nitrogen is removed, how much bacteria is removed, that sort of thing. We rank that higher. So the tool is flexible in those types of scoring situations, which I think is the beauty of the tool, actually. One of them.
Yeah, and what's good about it as well is that even though you can tweak the weight of each of those items, they are still priority items. So you are still getting benefit in each of those areas with your project, but it does allow you to kind of, like Grace said, just weight something a little heavier so that you can be sure that you're going to achieve the result that you need in that particular site.
So the next question that I have is again for Nissa and Grace. What's the singular biggest component you feel you need to improve in your efforts to bring more green infrastructure to Richmond?
That's a darn good question. Single biggest. Nissa, I'll let you go first. I got to think.
Single biggest need, is that what you said?
Yeah.
To make more green infrastructure, to implement more green infrastructure?
Hold on.
Yeah, repeat the question.
Sorry, I'm trying to balance the finding the mute button and being able to read the questions. What's the singular biggest component you feel you need to improve in your efforts to bring more green infrastructure to Richmond?
That is a good question. I think that the driver behind this project really was, how can we help folks collaborate? How can we help encourage interdepartmental collaboration for projects? Because you can have green infrastructures projects brought in, and nonprofit partners can bring them to the table and find money for them. DPU can find money for them. But if you don't have that communication and coordination between departments, people can often get discouraged to actually implement the project because it takes too long, or they run into too many barriers because they don't have good information about, for example, underground utilities and that sort of thing. So we really, I think, first wanted to design something that would help make it easier to identify where green infrastructure could be married with development projects on public lands or singularly implemented, and then develop a tool that would help kind of provide the data, the background data, so that folks could know that they would have less of those impediments when they were going to implement. Does that, yeah. How about, what do you think, Grace?
I know this is going to sound weird, but I think for me, the biggest component is visibility. So to show that the green infrastructure that already exists is both functioning, is beautiful, and is doing what it's supposed to do, I don't think there's enough awareness of folks of what's already out there. So they can look at it and say, oh, there's a green alley. It's reducing flooding. It's improving water quality. Let's have more of those. So I think we can do a better job of promoting projects that are out there and working. Like, look how good a job the Capitol Trail does, talking about how beautiful it is and how sustainable it is. So it's always in social media, it's always out there, it's always informing folks who may not know anything about it, but are learning about it as they use it and as they drive by it. My 2 cents.
Great. The next question that we have, will the tool require updating as projects are added in the city? If so, how often will that occur?
So we've talked about this in our meetings, and what the city has committed to do is to update the tool at least twice a year and inform because the GIS is going to change and the tool is going to change and all that kind of stuff needs to continually be updated, that we will take that on and get that done. Good question.
So those are the questions that I've seen come through on chat thus far. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to pose to Nissa and Grace this morning? If so, I'd encourage you to either put it in chat or in Whova, or I think we have time at this point. If you'd like to unmute yourselves and ask out loud, that would be okay too.
It's a free for all.
It is free for all.
These have been really good questions, though, I have to say.
Agreed.
All right, well, hearing none come through, Nissa, might I ask you to go back one slide? I think. Yes. All right, I just want to make sure that everyone has both Nissa's and Grace's contact information written down somewhere. They have asked me to encourage you to contact them if you'd like a live demo of Richmond's green infrastructure ranking tool. Please just send them an email, or if you'd like to drop your contact information into the chat, we can record it, and one or both of them will be reaching out to you if that's something that you're interested in. Just put your contact information right into the chat box for us. And then that last slide, Nissa. All right, Nissa and Grace, thank you so much for taking the time to put this presentation together, to put this project together, and to share with us what an amazing tool it is. I am going to be going back and reading through it again to make sure that I was able to absorb everything that you all presented today. For our audience members, thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure that you are utilizing Whova to make sure that you are getting all of the touch points that you can over the course of the forum. Of course, we would love both the forum, both the Alliance and Nissa and Grace would really love your feedback on this session. You can find the evaluation form by clicking the right session on the individual session page, this individual session page through whova. I want to thank you both, Nissa and Grace, so much for your time. And for all of you who participated today, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day and have a wonderful rest of the forum.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.